Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dan and Ian, and welcome to Madfest 2025. We've had Cannes, we've had Glastonbury, and now it's my personal highlight of the year, Madfest. I'm Justin Pearce. I'm the editor-in-chief of New Digital Age and Retail Media Age, and I'm also co-founder of Blue Stripe Group, along with my friends and business partners Andy Oakes and Lydia Oakes. And as well as owning one of the industry's leading trade publications in New Digital Age, or NDA, we also own a PR agency, the leading PR agency in this space, which no one's done before, so we believe in doing things differently. I say just like Madfest. And we're at NDA huge partners and supporters of Madfest. I think Madfest is one of our industry's crowning glories. Dan mentioned Mad Up North, it was amazing. If you didn't go this year, definitely be there last year. And I think why we are such massive partners is that we have the same values. We both stand for celebrating creativity and brilliance, technical amazement, and the people of our industry. Glastonbury is a theme. I would say Madfest is so similar to Glastonbury. I'm sure if you weren't there last week, you watched it on screen, and the best way to experience Glastonbury, I used to go when I was young, I used to go quite a lot, is to roam around. And I'd encourage you all to roam around Madfest. There are so many stages this year, there's so much going on. Every beach hut has got amazing stuff to see and amazing people to talk to, so roam around. I mean, do stay here this morning for this. And back to people, I'd say yes, technology does drive our industry. Technology is the foundation for our industry. And without the amazing technology you all use to create the amazing experiences consumers love, there would be no industry. But I would say it's the people that make this industry. That's why NDA was born, to celebrate the amazingly creative, inventive, often slightly crazy people that drive this industry. And that's everyone here in this room and outside in the festival itself. On one note, even though we've all mentioned South by Southwest, sorry, I don't want to mention that name, we mentioned Cannes and Glastonbury, there's one big difference here. At Madfest, all the food, all the drink is free all day for everyone. So please get out and experience it. So before we go into the main stage kind of roster today, there's a bit of housekeeping. I'll be here all day to sort of help glide the event along. One of the things that's really important is the Madfest app. You all should have it on your phones. You probably all used it to get into the festival. The Slido app, which is part of the Madfest app, that's where you can ask questions. So we've got amazing speakers on the stage here today. We've got amazing speakers throughout the week here at Madfest. But please ask questions. Obviously, it's my kind of job to ask questions, so what I do all day, every day, but you get tired of me asking questions, so please do ask questions on the Slido app. What else do you need to know about today? Our sponsors, our sponsors are so important. Like any event, we couldn't make this happen without our sponsors. Most have got picnic tables or beach huts outside. We've got one Blue Stripe Group, go and see it, but most beach huts and tables have got food and drink, so do drop in and see the sponsors. What's happening here today? In a second, as Dan said, I have the huge pleasure to once again interview Sir Martin Sorrell. He's one of my favourite interviewees. I talked to him in Cannes last week. Everything he says holds impact. Everything he says should affect the way you see your business growing. And also, another huge treat for me and hopefully for you, every year I get the chance to sit down and talk to a kind of celebrity on stage, one that has some kind of importance or relevance to the industry you work in, marketing and advertising. And this year it's Richard Ayoade, and I can't wait to chat to him later. But on top of all that, we've got sponsors, we've got brands like Heineken and Haribo and Uber and Carlsberg, Britvic, the line goes on and on and on. We've got some of the best tech companies around, some of the biggest platforms, and that is it. So I won't say much more today apart from asking our amazing speakers questions. Please get involved. Please use your app to ask questions. And apart from that, welcome to the best week of the year. Thank you very much. Martin, good morning.
Good morning, Justin.
So the theme of, or the title of your talk is Sir Martin's economic forecast. Go on. So,
always wrong.
Yeah, well, I'd say always right. Sir Martin Sorrell, one of the most influential people in advertising, gave you all a taste of what he thinks is going to happen in our industry in the year ahead. So are you feeling positive? What's the forecast? Are you feeling
So for this year, next year,
Let's
or both?
start with this year, looking ahead.
And where are we talking about? If I'm talking about the UK, probably it's a little bit wobbly. I think the government has obviously got some challenges socially from a political point of view. And they've got some challenges economically, and I don't think we're going to get much good news in October. So some signs, I was listening to, I think the bankers were meeting in Sintra in Portugal today, and I don't think the central bank, the Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey, was particularly optimistic. He mentioned weakening in the labour market. He still has to deal with above where he wants to see inflation. So I think the UK is a challenging place, certainly this year and maybe into next year. And I think the same thing applies to Europe, broadening it. I think France, Italy, Spain, maybe Spain a little bit less so, but certainly France and Italy are challenged too. So the big five in Europe, all challenged, except maybe Germany, where I think they've got a bit more fiscal headroom. Defense spending is being moved up, as we know, because President Trump has put pressure on NATO to increase defense spending above current levels, not to where maybe he would want it to be, but certainly increase. So maybe the Germans, who've been much more fiscally responsible, Germany will be stronger. On a more positive note, President Trump's on a roll. Okay. You may not like it, you may not but he had a strong week last week, and I think last week was a turning point for Trump. Not just the bombing, the surprise bombing of Iranian nuclear facilities, but going beyond that, couple of decisions by the Supreme Court, one around birthright, really, I think, have moved the needle. I had a very interesting dinner in Cannes with the Washington Post, and some of the poll data, which for the midterms are not going the way the Democrats would like to see them, and never underestimate Trump as a communicator. The markets, the stock markets are at all-time highs or close to all-time highs, driven by the Mag 7, or the MAGA 7 as we now call them. So I think North America I'm pretty bullish on. South America I'm super bullish on. I don't know whether we have any South American contingent here at all, but particularly Mexico, Brazil, undervalued, Argentina and Colombia I'd pick out in particular. The Middle East continues to grow. I think there is some contraction of budgets in the Middle East, in Saudi and UAE to some extent, and there's a refocusing by the major Arab nations on their domestic expansion rather than mega projects abroad, but there's still stronger growth. And I'm bullish about Asia as a whole. I mean, there's the China issue. The reason why what last week was so significant from the Iranian bombing is it wasn't Taco Trump. It was a much more decisive Trump, whether you agree with it or not. And that clearly is a warning signal to the Chinese and the Chinese administration around Taiwan. So I think probably we'll see an even more measured policy by China in relation to Taiwan. I don't think their intent is to invade. Their intent is to constrict, rather like a boa constrictor over time, tightening around Taiwan. But the Iranian situation was a warning signal. America not withdrawing, but continuing to be engaged. But I'd be bullish beyond, I mean, for clients in the audience who have 15-20% of their sales in China, which is probably the weighting that you should have when you look at GDP stats. China's 18 trillion out of 108, so it's about 20%. If you're above that or at that level, that's enough. Beyond that, India obviously benefiting hugely. Modi, really interesting actually. With the tensions that we've seen around tariffs, he's made a big push to opening up trade corridors, for example, with Europe. He was in Cyprus last week talking to the administration about opening up the Indian trade corridor. to Europe, so huge opportunities around the Indian economy. And then you've got markets like Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, Philippines, Malaysia and Singapore, which all offer opportunities. So broadly, I'd be bullish about those areas. I'd be cautious about Europe. And the other thing I would say to you, Justin, is this. I think the one of the issues that we face as an industry is we tend to look at the industry as one homogeneous industry, and it's really two. Madfest probably emphasizes the digital side of the industry more than the traditional. But last year we hit $1 trillion, so that's something to be celebrated in terms of scale. Not huge in relation to the investment industry, but still significant. 700 billion of that was digital, and 300 billion was traditional. The traditional piece is going backwards. Free-to-air TV, traditional newspapers and magazines, felling trees, distributing newsprint, on the traditional outdoor, all going backwards. Traditional radio, all going backwards. Actually contracting anywhere between 0 and 15%, largely depending on whether you have live sport or not. If you had live sport, you're probably down 0 to 5 to 10. If you didn't have live sport, you're down 10 to 15. That's one industry which frankly is in decline. The industry which I think we should focus on is the digital side of it. It's 700 billion, it's growing at about 10 to 15%, and it's worth just emphasizing again, particularly for this audience, the market structure. The leader by far is Alphabet, Google, with 250 billion. So it's 1/4 of the total, and it's more than 1/3 of the digital piece, the 700 billion. Second is Meta at 150, so a 15 share of the total. Third would be Amazon, around 60 billion. When we were at Madfest years ago, people used to laugh when we used to talk about Amazon getting to 100 billion in terms of ad revenues. They're well on the way to that figure. They will get there, in my view, within the next 3 to 4 years. So they're at 6%. And then TikTok outside China, including the US, about 40 billion, 4%. So those four platforms are half the market and 5/7 of the digital market. Now, I got criticized for saying, and with all apologies to any CMOs inside in the audience, for saying life got a bit simpler. And you may think that life has got a bit more complex, but actually if you look at the market structure, and when I say the market, we at S4 and Monks are totally focused on that 700 billion, which is growing again by 10 to 15%. That market structure is increasingly simplified. And the other thing just to emphasize is that market structure is going to be reinforced, in my view. The CapEx, as opposed to the OpEx, the advertising spend, of the Mag 7, of the big tech companies, is about $500 billion a year. So the biggest spender is Amazon, with about $100 billion a year of spend on CapEx around AI. The second biggest is Alphabet at 75. Meta is also at 75 billion. And others are spending at significant rates of around 50 billion plus. These are huge capital investments that are being made in capacity around AI. So that market structure is not going to weaken. Whether the regulators like it or not, and clearly they don't, but they're playing catch up all the time, that's not going to weaken. And just to finish off, these companies are as big as countries. Apple, I think, went back over 3 trillion market cap last night. Microsoft is around the same. Nvidia is around, I think, 3 trillion plus. These are as big in GDP. If you equate market cap to GDP terms and equate them, these are equivalent to countries. Germany is about 3.5 trillion. So if you think about each of these companies being as powerful as a country like Germany, they are huge and likely to become stronger. So bullish on geography in those geographies, maybe a little bit pessimistic about in the short to medium term around Europe. So that's the background to that.
Thank you. You mentioned that huge CapEx investment
Yeah.
in AI. What about AI itself? How can we distinguish between hype and real value?
Well, look, the really good news, I think, is the following. I think, coming back to the first question and uniting it with the second one, in the short term, it's going to be bumpy. We have so much uncertainty politically, US, China, Russia, Ukraine, Iran, still problematic, not forgetting things like North Korea. And then on top of it, you have tariffs. That has made, as everybody in this room knows, clients very hesitant to make decisions. Whatever people say publicly, in private, particularly where you have separation between ownership and control, which you have in most listed companies, and you could argue inside private equity companies, although probably it's more unified. But where you get the separation of ownership and control, people are very focused on maintaining the status quo. And in uncertain times, layering on tariffs, which are a one-time tax and are inflationary, we're yet to see the ripple effect. We don't know what the final tariff levels are going to be. It's not going to go back to pre-April the 2nd. The life did change in the Rose Garden at 9 p.m. on April the 2nd. But effectively, when that fog clears, the really good news is AI will, in my view, will be unleashed. That when the uncertainty is reduced, maybe when we see a little bit of geopolitical more stability, maybe fragmentation will increase, but particularly when tariffs are bedded down, when the deals are made, when the deals are agreed, then I think clients will start to focus on effectiveness and efficiency. In a world which is going to be slower growth, we'll have growth, we'll be growing at, say, 2 to 3% worldwide as opposed to 3+. Inflation will be higher and more stubborn, I think, than people have anticipated, and interest rates will be higher. Every client will be focused on effectiveness and efficiency. And in that world, AI, not just AI, blockchain, quantum, metaverse, all of the above are going to become increasingly important. The things that we heard in Cannes, the areas that people were very focused on a couple of things. Firstly, I think personalization at scale, coming back to Justin's question, is what was the biggest area of focus. And related to that, create costs as a percentage of media budgets. Any client that is operating, and I would say to all clients in the room, to go and have a good look. I was talking to one of the platforms last night that we should do a survey with clients as to what create costs are as a proportion of your media cost. Many of the clients that we deal with are talking about their create costs being at 10 to 15%. And when I started in the industry way back in the 70s and the 80s, agencies used to be paid something like 15% commission, 17.65 on cost. And we used to allocate about 10% to creative and about 5% to media. If we were doing it today, probably agency fees maybe 10% or maybe even less, and we might allocate it 50-50. But the point of the story is that create costs are too high, particularly in a world where there's going to be slower growth, where communication is going to be personalized at scale, and clients are looking at that very, very carefully. So the areas of impact are personalization at scale, visualization and copywriting. We had a session in the Palais with really three companies. Runway, any of you are au fait with Runway, a startup in the United States now valued at about $3 billion. Lead investors are General Atlantic, NVIDIA Corp Dev. We made a small investment through our venture fund in their last round, valued at $3 billion. And we had Minimax on stage as well, which is the Chinese Asian equivalent, scheduled probably to go public on the Hong Kong exchange. Again, a $3 billion valuation. Both text to video, and in the case of Minimax, text to audio companies collapsing the time taken to create content, to create video, to create ads at scale, collapsing time taken from months to days and from millions of dollars to hundreds of thousands of dollars. Some of you may have seen the Puma commercial that we made about 2 months ago using runway technology primarily. And then more recently, some commercials, some confidential commercials we made for a major automobile company. Again, collapsing the time and cost hugely. So really impacting visualization and copywriting. And the third phase of that, which we launched in the Palais, was Humane, the Saudi Arabian AI company with Luma, another equivalent to Minimax and to Runway. Luma, Indian PhD, Columbia University in America, sold his company to Apple, startup in the content space. Again, advanced technology. These are having huge impacts, and the technology is moving at light speed. The technology we used 3 months ago, 2 months ago for Puma is totally different today for the commercials we made in automobiles. So those two areas, personalization at scale, visualization and copywriting, are top of the agenda, particularly in relation to create costs. The third area is media planning and buying. I mentioned the $1 trillion. The focus on media planning and buying was shifted by Mark Zuckerberg's comments just prior to Cannes. You may have seen that he said that they were developing Advantage Plus, which is a meta media planning and buying tool, primarily for small and medium-sized enterprises. But what Mark said was, we will produce content for that media planning and buying at scale, and a small and medium-sized business will be able to create content and integrate the model into media planning and buying. Google have a thing called PMax, Performance Max, which is exactly the same. We don't know what proportion of that 250 billion flows through PMax. We do know roughly that 60 to 70% of Google's ad revenues come from small and medium-sized enterprises. It's not enterprise-driven in terms of scale, it's small and medium-sized enterprise. Same for Meta, and probably the same for Amazon. Those models, content and planning and buying tools, are very focused currently on small and medium-sized enterprise. They will move up, in my view, to being more enterprise-driven. And ultimately, going back to what I described as the market structure, that 700 billion in digital, which obviously is expanding each year by 10 to 15%, and is the growth part of the industry, will become increasingly dominated by the platforms, the ones that I've mentioned, the 3 Western and the 3 Eastern, Alibaba, Tencent, and TikTok or ByteDance in China, also having its operations outside China. They will become increasingly dominant, and the relationship will get closer, and agencies will increasingly be validators between clients who are using increasingly integrated tools in personalization at scale, visualization and copywriting, and media planning and buying. The bad news for our industry is that the 250,000 people who are employed roughly in media planning and buying, there won't be 250,000 jobs in 2 or 3 years' time. If we come back at Madfest each year, we will see continuing erosion. So those are the 3 big areas. 2 other areas I'll just quickly mention. General efficiency. Today we are in India working with AWS and Adobe and NVIDIA on major programs to reduce the cost of outside broadcasting. So I'll give you a concrete example. If you wanted to outside broadcast the Club World Cup, let's say the final that will take place in New Jersey in a few days' time. If you wanted outside broadcast, you need a truck, and that would cost you $10 million if you're a broadcasting company. You'd amortize that over 5 years, $2 million a year. With cloud and AI, using the technology companies I just mentioned and our consulting services, you'll be able to reduce that cost by 80 to 90%. There are examples similar to that throughout our industry on client and agency side where we are hugely reducing the cost. So that's the fourth area. And the fifth one that I find the most interesting is what we call somewhat pompously democratization of knowledge, but it's a fundamental change we're seeing in the way that we work. And the best example is NVIDIA. Jensen Huang has 51 direct reports. Now, if you went to McKinsey or Bain or BCG and said, what is the maximum management span, they would say usually 12 or 13 people. How is it that Jensen Huang reportedly can manage that span? The reason is that NVIDIA spreads the knowledge horizontally through its organization. So it's collapsing the layers inside. And as we all know, both the client and agency side, the biggest problem that we have, or certainly in my view, the biggest problem we have, is politics with a small p. It's organizational politics. And what is it that drives those politics? How do people control silos? They control silos through information, through control of information. With AI, information is spread horizontally in the organization. Everybody gets access. So the ability of people at senior levels to control information and the flow is eroded. So taking Jensen as an example, he doesn't do one-on-one meetings, or many. He sets his direct reports 4 or 5 KPIs, and he monitors them through the year. That, to my mind, is going to create huge efficiencies of knowledge inside the company. So, for example, we have something like 700, 750 people working on Alphabet, our biggest client. If we can unify those 750 through our own Google LLM, for want of a better description, that creates huge informational benefits. So, long answer, but 5 areas where we see impact of AI. In terms of the timing, the first 3 I mentioned, the first 2 in particular, are having huge impact already. And the thing I think you really have to focus on in the next 6 to 9 months is implementing AI at scale. And there are very few clients. There's only one client, to my knowledge, that has really impacted AI at scale across the marketing. That's General Motors. Norm de Greve at General Motors has been completely revolutionary in how he's set about changing the marketing function. And let me just say why he's doing that and why we see it also not just in the auto sector, but in the financial services sector. And that is the inbound competition that's coming. So Chinese EVs, BYD can produce an AV car for $10,000 using God's Eye technology, or an EV, as they announced recently, for $25,000. General Motors and other classic manufacturers cannot produce a car at that cost or at that price at this particular point in time. So they know that competition is coming. So what do they have to do? They have to become more and more efficient. That's one of the things. Obviously, EV, AV innovation is critical, but beyond that, it's about reducing costs. So he knows that at some point in time, the CEO of his company is going to come and say, you're going to have to reduce your media costs in order for us to compete. To avoid that or minimizing it, he's looking hard at his create costs. How can he use technology in the most efficient way, as effectively as possible, to increase the effectiveness, not just about cost, and the efficiency of what he does at scale. His model is a strategic agency model for the 4 brands, so GMC, Buick, Chevrolet, Cadillac, each have their own planning agency. We're the foundational agency underneath it, implementing the strategic choices that are being made at scale, creating, producing, and distributing content. That's the model that I think will become increasingly prevalent. So we'll see more and more development, but I think the fog has to clear around tariffs in particular before that happens.
Thank you. Look, we've got 5 minutes left, so
that was a long answer.
Good luck. Perfect answer. But with everything you've talked about, what does the leader of tomorrow look like? It's being born today. We've got CMO after CMO here on stage. You mentioned so many CEOs that you respect and admire. My microphone. So yeah, talking about, from everything you talked about, what does the leader of tomorrow look like? What do you look for when you're mentoring today?
Well, listen, I think there are three things, whether it's the leader, that everybody should be focused on. The first is, everybody talks about agility. Every client that we talk to, doesn't matter what level, talk about their organization being as agile as possible. The reality, as we all know, is very different. There isn't decisiveness, there isn't agility, there isn't speed, and agencies are just as guilty, frankly, of that as clients. So that's the first quality, I think, that is needed. The second, and this is very controversial, coming from the agency side of the business, is I think clients have surrendered too much control. I think this stemmed from 2008 and the banking crisis, when CFOs and CPOs said, let's get the headcount out. You know, we have three basic models. There's the outsourced model to the agency, the embedded, where we put our people into clients, and there's the in-house model. I think the last two are going to become more and more important, embedded and in-house. So some of the clients that we're seeing, for example, are increasingly in-housing their media planning operations. And with algorithms and AI, you can do that much more effectively. Norm de Greve at GM said to me, who knows more about the automobile business? People at GM or people outside? And the answer is people at GM. So you can become too insular. So I think taking back control of certain functions, not everything. It doesn't mean that all media buying should be done in-house. Doesn't mean that all media planning is. But I think you have to start considering how much is done internally, and maybe you need to invest more internally in certain functions. And the third area related to that is first-party data. If you don't have that, or if you do have that, and that is not integrated into a common platform that you can use at scale, that's a real problem. And third-party cookies have not been eliminated completely. You know, Google has made 3 or 4 delayed decisions on that. They still exist, but really they're being phased out. So agility, taking back control, and first-party, those are the 3 areas which we see continuously being really important in terms of qualities.
That, I think, is the perfect note on which to end. So, Martin Sorrell, as always, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Justin. Thank you.